My first visit when I was president was to Poland, and it was under the domination of the Soviet Union then. And that's the reason I went, was to show that I did not accept the claim of the Soviets that they were in charge of Poland. But I met with the first secretary, whose name was Garrick, and he asked me if I would remain and talk to him privately after the regular meeting was over, and I did. And to my great surprise, he said, "I want you to tell me about your Christian faith." So I explained to him my relationship with Jesus Christ. And the Polish people never did yield to the pressures from the communist dictators, the Soviet Union then, and they worshiped freely. I later went to South Korea, and the president then was named Park. And his wife had been killed by assassins. And he had a young, beautiful daughter, I think she was about 22 years old, who was acting as the First Lady of Poland. And I had the same experience with President Park. He asked me to stay after everybody else was gone, and I witnessed to him about my faith in Christ. And when he told me that his daughter was a believer, and he asked me if I would let one of the pastors in Seoul, South Korea, come and talk to him more thoroughly after I left, and I did. And now, by the way, his beautiful daughter is who? She's the new president of Poland, of South Korea. She was just elected a couple of months ago. So those were two experiences, but I think the most significant experience was when I normalized diplomatic relations with China. And at the banquet that night, when Deng Xiaoping and I were there, we had signed about 100 agreements during the brief visit that he made the first, about the end of January 1979. And he finally said, "Mr. President, you've done a lot for the people of China. What can I do for you?" And I said, "Well, you've signed a lot of agreements with the United States, and I appreciate that." He said, "No, I mean something personally that we might do for you." And I said, "Well, as a matter of fact, when I was a child, our heroes in the Plains Baptist Church were missionaries to China. And now you don't permit worship in China. And I know your communist beliefs involve atheism. And you don't permit Bibles to be distributed in China. And you don't permit missionaries to come to China. So that's my personal request of you, that you let those three things happen." And he was very surprised. And he said, I'll give you my answer tomorrow." So the next morning we had breakfast together, and he said, "I've thought about that." And he said, "We're not going to let missionaries come back to China, because when they were here, they considered themselves superior to Chinese people. They tried to change our culture as well as our religious faith. So no more missionaries in China. But I've decided to let Bibles be printed and distributed in China. And I've decided to ask our Parliament, when it meets, to guarantee freedom of worship." So in 1982, which was 3 years later, they did that. And now freedom of worship is guaranteed in China. And I read an article in a news magazine recently that the #1 producers of Bibles are in China, and the fastest growing Christian nation on earth is, guess, China. China now has the 3rd largest number of Christians on earth, and in the near future, I'd say within 10 years, China will have more Christians than any other nation in the world.